Welcome to the 500th episode of the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward Friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and today on the podcast, we are talking about the Global Coffee Townhall that happened recently that was a huge success. Before we get started, if you are looking to prepare for a super successful 2022 and you have never focused on customer acquisition planning before for your coffee business, this is a great time to start considering doing that. On the first week of November, we are starting our last 6-week program for 2021, and we are running our first ever 6-week program purely focused on customer acquisition planning. So this is something that we teach a lot in the mastermind groups and with our one-on-one clients at Map It Forward. So if this is something that you are interested in, head to the show notes. Don't be shy. And I promise that, and we guarantee this, that's why I can promise it. I promise you that customer acquisition planning will make all the difference to the success of your business. We give you a template and the results are guaranteed. So let's talk about now the Global Coffee Townhall, and let's talk about the fact that this is the 500th episode of the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward. The intention behind this podcast is bringing people together. And it's a different kind of person that comes together around Map It Forward content. But our focus at Map It Forward is about bringing people together who are open-minded and who want to have clear discussions about things where they may agree or they may disagree. And the Global Coffee Townhall was a fabulous and successful attempt at doing that. If you don't remember, or this is your first exposure to the idea of the Global Coffee Townhall, it was an event that took place in October over the space of a week where we discussed one question over 4 events in 4 different languages. And that question was, what needs to change in the coffee industry in 2021 and beyond? Surprisingly to me, there were a couple of themes that were actually brought up across all 4 discussions. I anticipated that all 4 discussions would be very different, but that wasn't the case. There were a lot of differences between them, but there were a couple of themes that were similar in all 4 discussions. Now, those 4 discussions took place first in English, then in Spanish, then in Arabic, and then in Portuguese. So as you can imagine from all of those, we were looking at different occupants from the supply chain or custodians, not occupants, but custodians of the supply chain across all of those 4 discussions. We anticipated, by we I mean the Map It Forward team and the moderators of those discussions, of which there was 2 different moderators in each of the events. We anticipated that the English and the Arabic conversations would be more focused around the consumer end of the supply chain. And we expected the Spanish and the Portuguese one to be focused around the producer end of the supply chain. Man, were we surprised with the results. So let's start with what was common throughout all of them. And then we'll talk about what was different amongst all of them. To my surprise, the common theme across all of them was that people believed that there needs to be a determinant body. Someone who is responsible for organizing the education and the marketing material that determines how we signal the customer about what's going on in the coffee supply chain. To say that differently, every single conversation the question was asked, who is responsible for telling the consumer what's going on with the coffee supply chain? And the flow-on effect of the conversation starting from there was there needs to be something or someone responsible for making sure that the customer understands that the price of coffee has to go up based on the fact that we have coffee shortages, we have the price of coffee going up, we have shipping delays, we have freight costs going up by sometimes 700%, we've got labor shortages, etc., etc. The coffee supply chain is under huge strain, and we don't have any organization taking responsibility for the messaging to the consumer. Should that be Specialty Coffee Association? Should that be left to the big corporates that are doing it? The Nestle's and the Starbuckses of the world. Should we be doing that as individuals? Now, this was a discussion that whether it was from the producer's perspective or from the consuming end's perspective, the cafe owners and roasters, everybody was wondering the same thing. The other thing that came up in all four discussions was a discussion around the constraints on the supply chain. So that was huge freight costs, logistical issues, what's going on with the shortage of coffee, what do roasters understand about the contracts that they've signed? These are all things that kept coming up. The very first question asked in the English discussion was something that was very interesting, and it really was what set the stage for an incredible discussion that ensued. And the conversation was started by Judy Gaines. And Judy started the discussion with this idea of producers defaulting on contracts. Now, this set up the discussion so that we went straight to the heart of a flow-on effect of coffee shortages. What default contracts are is when, let's say, for example, a contract is signed a year ago when the price of coffee on the C market was half of what it is now, and the delivery of that coffee is now come due, and producers are defaulting on those contracts and not supplying the coffee, because if they were to sell that coffee to somebody else in current day prices, the difference would make up for any penalties that they would have to get or have to pay for defaulting on that contract. Another way is they just say they don't have the coffee and they can't deliver, and then they would sell that to somebody else. Now, that was a discussion that was unique to the English conversation. Some other things that were unique that were discussed was in the Arabic conversation, I found out for the very first time ever that coffee is grown in Saudi Arabia. There are coffee producers in Saudi Arabia. So we thought that the Arabic discussion was going to be heavily focused on the consuming end. We were wrong. A big chunk of the discussion was led by agronomists and producers in Saudi Arabia, which was fantastic. And you really, when you get the opportunity, and it should be up in a few weeks, we are going to translate these discussions into 10 different languages through the subtitles. And you should really check out each of these conversations, because we really got an insight into the quality of the coffee that's being grown in Saudi Arabia, which is a desert, and what they anticipate for how that market is going to grow. Other things that we found out that were different amongst each of the discussions was that in the Spanish conversation, there is a deep focus on trying to get elevated wages for baristas and for employees who are roasters in and across Central and South America, purely because there are severe labor shortages. And baristas are choosing to work for businesses that are saying that they will give healthcare. Now, this is not unique. You hear the same kind of thing happening in conversations that are happening in the US, but that didn't come up in the town hall, in the English version of the town hall. It was heavily focused on the supply chain. And in the Portuguese conversation, as you might expect, it was heavily focused on supply chain because of what's happening in Brazil. And it was super inspiring to hear people talking about the hope that they have for what's coming in the future, or even though there are a number of constraints that they are heavily under in the supply chain, particularly out of Brazil. All in all, it was an incredible discussion. And overall, 600 people turned up to the town hall, whether it be in English, Spanish, Arabic, or Portuguese. Across the 4 events, there were 600 attendees, which was astronomical. They attended either through Zoom or through YouTube, and it can be a little deceiving if you watch the YouTube videos, because only those people who turned their cameras on, and there were a large number of people that were very camera shy, so they kept their camera off, and so only the people who had their cameras on went through to YouTube. But there were a huge number of people that didn't have their cameras on and participated in the discussion. I want to say a special thank you to everyone who did come. It was a very rich conversation. People were raving afterwards. We have decided we will make this an annual event. We had agronomists, we had producers, we had importers, exporters, roasters, baristas, cafe owners, podcasters, authors. We had scientists, we had association members, we had journalists. We had so many different kinds of people there. And I want to thank everyone for their support of this event. We gained such a rich understanding of what people think is the answer to this question of what needs to change in 2021 and beyond in the coffee industry. But by no means was the conversation extensive. It went for 2 hours, and we left each of the conversations thinking that was such a rich conversation, but we didn't get anywhere near far enough with it. And that's really great. Because we hope that people will then take those discussions in amongst their colleagues and into their workplaces and continue the discussion. Now, we will be releasing the Global Coffee Town Hall in each of the languages on the podcast, the audio version of the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, this podcast, you can find each of the conversations in the playlist called the Global Coffee Town Hall. Special mention to each of our moderators. My co-moderator in the English version was Madeline Longore Garcia, and I can't thank Madeline enough for such a great supportive conversation that we had through the English version of the Global Coffee Town Hall. Our moderators for the Spanish the Spanish Global Coffee Town Hall was Jethro Sepulveda and Jari Smith Barrientos. The Arabic Global Coffee Town Hall, I'm going to keep doing it, no doubt, was moderated by Sara Al-Ale and Nawar Adra. And the final one, the Portuguese Global Coffee Town Hall, was moderated by Felipe Croce and Kelly Stein, who is a wonderful podcaster. And if you haven't checked out Coffea, her podcast yet, please do. So that's the wrap up for the Global Coffee Town Hall. It was a wonderful way to wrap up what has been an incredibly challenging year. We have about 6 weeks before we wrap up all of our content for Map It Forward for 2021. As I said, I think 2022 is going to be even more challenging than 2021, simply because I believe there is going to be some colossal economic fallout from 2020 and 2021. Even though all of that happened, I walked away from the Global Coffee Townhall with so much hope and encouragement from each of the discussions. We have some incredible humans in our industry who were not interested in talking about things that only affect a portion of the industry. They spoke about things that affect the entire supply chain. And I was incredibly proud to be a part of all of those conversations. I'm really hopeful for our industry. And I didn't think that that's how I would finish off 2021. But I'm extremely glad to say that I am hopeful for the future of our industry because of the incredible humans that came together to discuss from their perspective what needs to change. And the changes that people are looking at making are all very encouraging. Special mention to the event sponsors, CoffeeNet, Los Pirineos, and Baratza. This event, all 4 events, would not have been possible without them. We knew that we wanted to pay everyone for all of the work that they did on this town hall, but we also knew that we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't find a way to fund the event while also making it free. And those 3 businesses, CoffeeNet, Los Pirineos, and Baratza, all came through with sponsorship money for this event. So please support their businesses. Their links will be in the show notes. And don't forget to look out for the episodes of the town hall that are going to be released as audio versions of the podcast in the coming weeks. As well, check the YouTube playlist, Global Coffee Town Hall, and read the translations. They will be available in 10 different languages, and we'll remind you of that when it's available. If you're on the mailing list, you'll know about that first. Thanks again for 500 episodes and sticking it this long. It's been an absolute honor to bring this podcast to you through all the thicks and thins of what we've experienced over the past 5 years as a Map It Forward brand. Here's to the next 500. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.